Today we are going to continue with the next shot using Blender 2.9. And there's a reason why. The shot we did yesterday, we did in Tahoma and Krita. And what we have going on here is the guard makes an announcement that the prince has arrived in the court. And we see here in the storyboard that the next shot is a close-up of these two guys. So because of that, we've got a situation where we're going to want to be able to kind of leverage one shot into the next and take the drawings of these characters in close-up and be able to scale them up or down from here. And it kind of suggests that maybe an infinite canvas would be useful as well. So for this shot, that's what we're going to do. So I went ahead and kind of sketched some things in here. Hope you're not bumming that I took the liberty of doing that offline, but that's where we're at. So I'm going to kind of take the approach on this of doing I don't know if I really have a name for it. I would say the sort of clean up and tighten up as you go approach. Mainly because it's fun. I find I tend to have fun working this way. So basically all in one layer. I just sketch the stuff in there, and then as I'm going along and I have it clearer and clearer in my mind what I'm trying to do, I just go ahead and erase and redraw, tightening things up, and the pencil test does in fact become the ink, if you will. So not a lot to really say about this process. Now if I'm going to talk, if I'm going to jabber while doing this, probably the most sensible thing to jabber about would be the election, since that seems to be the topic of the day. Well, interestingly, I found that I posted something on Facebook, which I rarely do, about, well, my opinion of some of the things that have been going on, and that post garnered a fair amount of attention, mostly supportive of my view, which I won't get into here. I will say, though, that there is a possibility that there's something I've been thinking about doing for quite a while, and that is creating a new YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel would be, its title would be Alt Center. Alt Center. Get it? Not the alt-right, not the alt-left, but the alt-center. Because I have a firm conviction that solutions to complex problems in the socio-cultural and political sphere are always nuanced. They always turn out to be a compromise in the sense that neither side ever really gets exactly what they wanted. And in point of fact, probably the most dangerous thing is for one side of the argument to have so much power, which of course they're happy to have. Why wouldn't they be? The problem is the mindset that says that, you know, if I were God and I ruled the universe and everything was done my way, it would be a much better place. And I firmly believe that if you think that, you're just plain wrong. You're in denial of you're not only in denial of a fact of the human condition, which is that we all benefit tremendously from each other, and usually benefit the most and learn the most from the people who vehemently disagree with us. That's what's wrong with the cultural conversation, is we often have these knee-jerk reactions. I'll actually give you an example of what I'm talking about. The only, let's say, critical comment, if you will, about the item that I post came from a very dear friend who happens to be on the complete opposite side. Well, I shouldn't say that. If I'm alt-center, that means I'm not really very strongly right or left, but let's say he's very strongly on one of the two sides. If you followed me for a while, you can guess which side he's on because you kind of know what side I'm on, which side I tend to be on anyway. And he posted a comment about wanting to go forward with some sort of conversation whereby he can maybe set me straight on some items related to the opinions I shared. What was interesting about his message was that he said that I was missing some facts, and then he put in parentheses or in dashes or something. He said, and I believe intentionally. Um, and I thought, wow, it's really interesting that so often, think about it, what happens in the cultural conversation, especially on the news with the talking heads. What happens is the great crime that we're going to debate now is the fact that you accused me of intentionally leaving out facts. That's the great crime here. The actual issues we're talking about, no, that's not the crime. That's not the problem. It's the fact that you've offended me. You know what? His comment does not offend me in the least. I could totally understand not only where he might think that I left some information out intentionally, but in point of fact, he's completely correct. I left out a lot of information for the simple reason that in a post that's essentially an op-ed piece, if you will, there just isn't. You can't engage the audience and expect them to read something for 3 hours, right? There's a limit to how much you can really say. And so you have to be careful to be a bit more concise if you expect people to read it. So, yeah. So in point of fact, if I'm honest, he's completely right. I did leave some things out. It'll be really interesting to find out what items he takes issue with. And for me, this is actually quite literally the point. We're at a time and a place in the social cultural conversation where the absolute most important thing is for us to all take a chill pill, realize that the people that disagree with us strongly are just as passionate, just as sincere, just as concerned as we are. And, well, if you're me, you've got an underlying assumption as well that if you want to solve the problems that we face, whatever they might be, we always come to better solutions when we engage with people that strongly disagree with us. Because they're going to bring a perspective we don't have. So, probably most of the people out there that hear this right now are going to say, yeah, dude, right on, man. You're going to probably agree with me, I expect. Because the truth is, statements like I just made typically are agreed with by people on both the right and the left. And then what we have to do is move past that agreement and get into the conversation itself, which again runs the risk of becoming highly polarized in many ways. To which I would say, that's okay. It's perfectly fine for it to be highly polarized, as long as we can maintain our civility. And I think the biggest thing that tends not to happen in the, obviously, what I call the talking head space, which is essentially on the news, where you got 40 seconds. You have 40 seconds in order to make a cogent argument about something or other, and oftentimes that attempt to use those 40 seconds well is made difficult because the person who disagrees with you is constantly jumping in and interrupting, or that sort of thing. It's really, really hard. And so, and what's interesting about that is what do people then have to react to? In terms of how do they evaluate how that debate or conversation actually went? The only thing they really have to react to or respond to or draw an opinion about is actually the superficial stuff. Is the person that made, that I saw for 40 seconds, are they good looking? I mean, it seems comically ridiculous, but, you know, this is what we do. We make these sorts of really quick judgments, and that's part of the way our brains work. We're constantly making evaluations. We're constantly drawing connections. Sometimes those connections are really, really tenuous. In fact, I would say they're probably tenuous more often than they're um, accurate, because we're talking about conclusions that come from a visceral, basically emotional reaction to whatever it is we're confronted with, the issues that are being discussed. So, what's the real force? What's the force that's actually at work there? Generally, the number one force that comes to bear on how you perceive these difficult issues is fear. What are you afraid of? Um, I object to a political campaign that basically amounts to be very afraid. Be afraid of this, be afraid of that. It's not that the issues at hand are not something we should not be concerned about or afraid of, because it's very possible we should. But is it not true that more often than not, that message sort of devolves into by necessity, by the way, devolves into a very simplistic argument. Because let's face it, we want to win the election. Everyone wants to win. That's perfectly natural. Okay? So then the strategy becomes, in many cases, I want you to be utterly terrified. If the worst thing that could ever happen is if this person came into power, you're going to lose this, you're going to lose that, you're going to be harmed in this way, you're going to be harmed in that way. And so the whole the whole approach is diametrically actually opposed to a framework that would ever lead to practical or useful solutions to any problems at all. It's literally all about making sure you're as fearful as can be of an outcome that doesn't, favor your general preferences. And, well, why is that concerning? Well, it's concerning because that simplistic presentation is almost always, at the end of the day, pretty much a lie. It makes it difficult. But anyway, I suppose if I have some really significant socio-political commentary to make, maybe it's better to make it through a story like this, through a cartoon. And I think generally speaking that's probably true. Probably is better. Because then you can entertain people and maybe get the opportunity to get them to think a little bit. That's not really my agenda, with this show. That's not my agenda at all. I mean, this is really more for kids. But okay, so now I do see a bit of a problem. It's interesting. It would be less of a problem in Blender 2.79, but what I see going on here is that when I zoom in, and this is generally would be deemed to be desirable behavior, is that the grease pencil brush is adapting. In other words, the brush knows that I'm really, really zoomed in, and so my brush is actually much thicker than it would appear here. So the problem is, potentially, what's this going to look like when we zoom in on this character? My guess is that if we zoom in with the camera, in the close-up shot, maybe we're going to wind up with lines that are thicker than what we want. Now, we can obviously compensate for that, so it's not a big problem. But it's something to be aware of. Whereas I suspect if I were to, let's just test this. Okay, so you can kind of see that, those are some pretty bold lines, right? Well, let's go into edit mode. So I'm hitting Control Tab, jumping to edit mode, and I'm going to go Control Alt right mouse button. I'm just going to grab this. Okay, and what I'm going to do, and by the way, first I'm going to save my work. Okay, what I'm going to do is just expand this up. Okay, let's jump back into draw. Yeah, exactly as I suspected. Okay, as you can see, um, the by actually just scaling up the strokes, relatively speaking, the brush size stayed the same. Therefore, when the character is in a close-up, the ink lines look correct. And again, my suspicion is if I achieve the close-up with the camera, which is kind of what you'd want to do, I suppose, then the thickness of those lines will not be scaled accordingly. In most cases, that actually kind of makes sense. It's sort of the way you'd want it to work, and it's really a fix because that's not how Blender 2.79 worked. I do see in this situation where, it kind of turns out that really is probably not what I'd prefer, but I think the solution really is to just sort of do things the grease pencil way, which means to leave the lines as they are for the wide shot, and then when I go to the close-up, just select all the lines and then just shrink them. You can quite easily. I believe, let's see, I'm going to try to do this the way we would have done it in Blender 2.79. So I can grab these lines, and what I can do is it Alt-S? Yes. You hit Alt-S, and you can just scale the lines. So, like I said, this is not a big deal. Just something I kind of noticed that I hadn't thought about before I started the shot. So yeah, anyway, this it's a crazy time and place we're living in. And of course, it's very tempting to, since I'm just sitting here drawing, it's kind of tempting to talk about what my argument or contention is about some of the issues at hand. So I'm not going to do that today. If you, and I don't mind talking about it, as I was a few minutes ago, where I'm just kind of philosophically weighing in on some observations about the human condition. But if you want me to be a little more open about my political views, then put something in the comments and say, yeah, Dave, let it fly, baby. And I will. But it does look like the likelihood is that I shouldn't say the likelihood. You know what? You get busy. You wind up with other things going on. And the thing you talked about doing, you don't do. So will I create a new YouTube channel completely unrelated to animation called Alt Center? Maybe. Might. And the particular friend that I mentioned earlier, to start it out with a conversation with him would be a perfect place to start it, because he really is the most ardent, vocal supporter of one of the particular candidates that I know, by far. I don't want him to look like he's frowning, per se. Don't necessarily want him to be smiling either. He's just kind of there. Let's see here. I'm going to refer on my other screen. I'm going to look at the close-up. Oh, yeah, well, okay. According to this, yeah, I kind of made a mistake here. According to this, Prince Vespar is, we do see his ears. So we'll kind of, we'll kind of do it like that. So the cool thing, this way of working, the little bits of sketchiness that remain on the screen don't really do any harm, and frankly kind of actually look cool. They make everything look a little looser. Got a good feel to it, I think. Boom. Boom. Yeah, not horrible. Not horrible. So what's the costuming situation here. I'm thinking that, and by the way, this I should put something here just to indicate, because actually that is essentially a crown he's got going on his forehead. Oops. So if you are using the stock setup on Blender 2.9, your eraser isn't going to quite probably work the way mine does, because I've got the eraser set up to erase based on points. So what it does is it just literally deletes the stroke points. The default eraser doesn't do that. The default eraser is much softer and sort of gradually diminishes the lines. So you have to erase over it quite a lot in order to fully get rid of a line. And I don't like that. I wanted to, when I'm ready to take something out, actually what I really wanted to do was be able to just hit control and immediately have the lasso eraser invoked. That's how I do it in OpenTunes or Tahoma. And I guess what we'll do is let's just go ahead and have a little bit of fun with his costume. There is a fair amount later in the show of symbolism that kind of harkens back to probably Middle Ages Catholic Church kind of thing, even though this story is actually taking place in ancient Middle East. Just from a costuming standpoint, I'm like, you got to do something, and I've kind of mixed things up a bit from different eras, just because to me it's like it's a kid's show and who cares, right? That's pretty much my driver. I just don't think it matters that much as long as it looks cool. So Vespar's got a fair amount of hair, and we probably don't want it to be defying gravity too much. So yeah, Vespar winds up being he's not the driver of the villainy in the show, but he is in practical terms the villain, because he's the one who in the long run winds up, from episode to episode, he's the one who's chasing our heroes sort of across the land. So if you're thinking that seems suspiciously similar to Prince Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender, I would agree with you. It is similar, and that was just a decision I made. I'm certainly not copying Avatar. But yeah, I mean, it's an influence for sure. I love the character of Zuko. I like the way he's haunted by well, I mean, I guess Vespar has the same problem. He's got to confront at some point the fact that the people that have been most influential in his life, namely his father and probably Golek, are evil. And he is trying to please his father by chasing down these guys and, chasing them across the country. So yeah, it's definitely a similarity. But I would definitely hope that this would be perceived as quite a different story. Now this guy's got more of a, well, wait, no, according to my storyboard, he doesn't even have a headband, so let's just kind of part his hair in the middle. Now, this guy's an interesting guy. You might say he's Vespar's conscience. So he's not, well, if we're going to take the Avatar metaphor to its extreme, then this guy would be serving a bit of the function of Uncle Iroh in Avatar, but he's a much different character. He's a soldier. He's really probably got more in common with Barda in Deltora Quest. But he's essentially Vespar's caretaker, if you will. He's the guy that kind of goes around with Vespar. And okay, so if you're wondering about maybe character drawing or this sort of thing, what you're seeing here is pretty indicative of what is happening in my head. When I sketch the stuff in, I sort of get to a place where I can see it in my head. And once I can see it in my head, then in a way I want to use as few lines, like right now, look, let's deal with this guy's nose. So I'm gonna zip in here in the front view so that I can hit the 9 key and flip the canvas. Okay, so what I'm wanting to do is I want to actually put in as few lines as possible to capture the characterization. It tends to be a look that I like, and it seems to work well for ink and paint, and giving the show a visual characteristic that I like. So I don't really want to give him any wrinkles. He's not exactly a young guy, but he's not exactly an old guy. He's probably 30s, kind of thing. So he's definitely a rugged, outdoorsy kind of guy. And that's why he's Vespar's caretaker, for lack of a better term, is because he teach him how to fight, teach him how to hunt, teach him how to use a sword. That's his. So he's very important, and at some point, I think, and I literally mean I think because I don't remember in the script, but I'm pretty sure this is the guy that begins to prompt Vespar over time to maybe question some of the things he's doing. I'm going to go back to the camera view. Yeah, that feels pretty good, actually. We're going to have to change this a bit for the close-up. But he's supposed to be a fairly kind-looking guy. I'm going to move that in just a little bit. Okay. And I would say I don't consider costuming my super strong suit, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, Tobias. This guy's name is Tobias. Yeah, it's really actually kind of interesting seeing how Tobias interacts with the king, because there's some things that come up, especially in regard to the recent part of the story where they're obviously Golek is casting dispersions on Asher, the holy man, and Golek has an agenda that is very much in opposition to the role that Asher plays in the community. And Tobias would find that very, very strange because, everybody in the kingdom knows Asher. I mean, he's the monk who feeds the orphans. He serves a really important function in the kingdom, and he's well thought of by almost everybody. So for ever to be suggested that he is a socio-political problem for some reason would be very strange. Oh, in point of fact, he is a social political problem for the king for reasons we don't yet realize, right? I'm not going to explain it all here either. Okay, so one thing I think I want to do differently on Tobias is let's give him a little heft. Something like that, and then I want to give him like bare shoulders. So yeah, that feels pretty good. So he's kind of got this thing on. I don't even know what you call it. I mean, I'm just making stuff up here, right? Just doing something to make it look like it's kind of real or useful. It's like in the old days with CGI, you'd put what they called nurnies. You're trying to make a spaceship or something, you'd add nurnies, which are just little nonsense bits of detail that just kind of make it look like it might actually do something, Gotta have your nurnies. Okay. I'm going to give him some big beefy Yeah, I mean, his arms are a little oversized there, but I think it sort of suits the characterization of Tobias. This is the first time I've drawn him. I kind of had an idea in mind, but I've never actually drawn the guy, so. And then he's gonna have a, everybody kind of wears skirts. Okay, it is what it is in this kingdom. And I'm gonna tighten this up. And you can see, actually, see what I did a minute ago was I drew the belt. Well, I don't really want to draw the belt, actually, if the truth be known. What I want to do is draw the contours that suggest to the mind that the belt is there. This is kind of what I was describing earlier when I was working on the guy's face. For me, at the end of the day, that is just, it just looks better. Um, and then you can use the color to maybe give, create the borders between, little pieces and whatnot. Now, we do have a bit of a problem here because these guys are, I don't know, let me just keep playing with this. They're kind of standing side by side. So again, this is actually a good example of what I just said. I don't really need to draw his arm, right? This is all just going to be colored in, and plus it's going to be in shadow. What I need to draw is this little line right here. And for me, if you get into like painting and stuff like that, the type of painting I like the best is impressionistic, like really good portrait painting where somebody knows how to lay down just one little tiny smackerel of color, and all of a sudden, poof, you just see the character or the portrait come to life right in front of you, Now I'm going to take this out because in the last shot we did, we used this background image that we really zoomed in close on. Well, we're going to use the exact same one here. So all in all, I would say we're in pretty good shape. How long have we been going here? A half hour. I think it might be probably time to pause and keep the video to a half an hour. So let's just say the next step will be to add the color, smack in the background, and then we'll just have to do some, we just need to do some lip sync on this guy as he announces Prince Vespar. And yeah, I think that's it. And then maybe we might play around with taking, it might be interesting to take this and offset it, which we don't need to use a separate grease pencil object, by the way, just to be clear. One of the things you can do here is there's a section here called relations, and relations is analogous to the old Blender 2.79 parenting option for grease pencil layers. So you actually can parent any of these layers to an object, an empty, whatever, in order to move them around in the scene and basically have them behave as separate objects, even though they're really part of the same grease pencil object. I've found personally having multiple grease pencil objects in my scene is just more cumbersome than necessary, and just adds more confusion because you're having to sort of jump around more in the outliner and that sort of thing. So, but that looks pretty good. Why don't we go ahead and get the background image in there? So we have a little bit of context for the color, and then we will leave it until the next session. So I'm going to go back to object mode so that I can insert an image as plane. And as I recall, I've got to go in my browser. I'm just actually going back through my history because not too long ago I was in the folder that had the background image that I want to use here, so I am having to go. There it is. Okay, so this is in folder 39. Shot number 39. So let's go to 39 here. And we're actually going to steal this out of the render folder, and we're just going to take the very first one. Boop. Okay, and Then what we'll do is we'll size it up. I want to make sure that the proportional editing isn't on. If proportional editing were turned on right now, then when I move this in the y-axis, it would drag the grease pencil object along with it. So we're going to hit GY, which means go on the y-axis, and just move this back. Now, this doorway is not very far behind these guys, so it's not like we're going to be getting a bunch of parallax and that sort of thing going on. So all we want to do is just get this kind of, sort of, to the right scale. Probably something like that is kind of reflects what I had in mind per the storyboard. Okay, so that's that, and then potentially we could even use lights to put a bit of a gradient on the background, you know, so that it's not just sort of bursting out there. One thing I want to check right now before I finish is, I'm going to save that by the way, is I want to look at the material for this guy. If we look at the material, I wonder, I don't know that I've even done this yet, is make quick and dirty adjustments to the material here without, you know, going to the node-based interface. So what I'm wondering is, and if you know, please post something in the comments, where is the emission? Is that the emit value? Okay, let's go into rendered mode here just to make sure. So emission and emit are not apparently the same thing. Oh, yes they are. Okay, well that's interesting. Okay. Okay. So how do you actually turn this down? I'm guessing maybe here we go. I think here we go anyway. So the base color is actually the image. There is no subsurface color, so you could, I believe, tint this. So like if I take that to like a really obnoxious yellow, I believe, yeah, that doesn't quite, yeah, I guess it does. It does. It took Blender a minute to sort of snap it in, but that works kind of as advertised. Well, that's interesting because what that means is you could actually use the subsurface color in the way that I previously used emit. Now it doesn't make it invisible, but you could actually tint the color using subsurface. So that's cool. That's quite useful. And so now that I've solved how to do that, I don't need to actually do it right now. So that's that. I think we're going to stop and we'll do ink and paint, or I should say paint, and lip sync in a bit. Truthfully, until I'm ready to smack the color on, I mean, I guess I'm kind of there. So I was going to say I could, it might be useful to take this item and just make it invisible. Then go back to this view. So just turn it off and on as needed. In the outliner, you see that you can do that. Sometime soon, I'd probably need to create a video that explains how you take different parts of your shot and assign them to view layers so that they can be processed separately in the node-based compositor for color correction and things like that. Because the way the view layers works with everything in a Blender scene is different, a little bit different than the way it works with the grease pencil. And the difference in a nutshell is this: if you want something to show up in your compositor so that, like right here, you've got your render layers, and you can see your view layer is the default, which is named view layer. Okay. Well, normally what you're going to do is you're going to create collections and map what's in the collections to the view layer, whereas with the grease pencil, each individual layer in the grease pencil can be mapped to a separate view layer. So it becomes a little tricky because you may want to take different grease pencil layers and put them out in the node-based compositor, and then you want to be able to alpha over your background. So in other words, we want to take our grease pencil stuff and we're going to want to composite it over the background and have the ability to do like color correction of the individual things. So there's a bit of a few steps you want to take in order to accomplish that The good news is it's all quite doable. It works great, but you kind of have to understand how view layers work. So anyway, but we'll get to that another time. If that's like a turn on and you really want to learn about that, put something in the comments. Otherwise, we'll just keep moving forward. And as you know, there will be more.